not necessarily tribal or regional.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television, reaching you live from our studios here in the nation's capital city of Abuja. Right about now, let's take a look at some of the stories that made the headlines on our dailies this morning. We're starting with the Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story there on page 5, you'd see passengers stranded over fresh Nigeria-UAE roll. The riders, agents, travelers count losses. Stakeholders commend federal government's tit for tat, seek review of pacts. Another rider states federal government reciprocates travel ban against UK, Canada, and Saudi. And on page 17, you'd see subsidy. Daily Trust economists seek injection of 2 trillion naira in education, health. And still on page 5, you'd find what Buhari is doing to tackle insecurity. That's according to presidency, and this is following, a response to an editorial that was put out by the Daily Trust. Now, you'd also see on page 8, pandemonium as kidnappers invade Taraba market, abduct traders, yet another kidnapping incident. And on page 6, you'd see reactions as Dora Emirate turbans Buhari's son. Page 21 states 188 million transactions recorded on eNaira platform. NFF sacks Raw, appoints Ugevon interim Super Eagles boss. And on page 8, you would find emo monarchs abducted, palaces set on fire. Tragic. These are some of the stories on the Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, now let's take a look at the Punch newspaper this morning, where you have quite, a number of stories there. The lead story says, we won't reverse travel ban on FG's threat. That's according to the UK government. And the writers there says, press statement on travel ban stands despite FG's planned retaliation. That's according to the High Commission. UK, others lack moral rights to allow their airlines to come to Nigeria, says Aviation Minister. We have recommended travel ban for Canada, United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, others. Well, you'd also see some other interesting stories there, talking about the first one at the very top. Over 500 million pushed into extreme poverty over healthcare costs. That's according to World Bank and WHO reports. You'd find that on page 23. The next story, COVID-19 infections rise by 326.67% in 1 week. Nigerians shun safety rules. Court stops trial of ex-army chief, others over 13.8 billion naira fraud. Reps invite Malami Adebayo FRS as controversy emerges over tax holidays. Also, below the pictorial there, you would see the stories. Ghanaian, 2 Nigerians nabbed with 10 kilogram cocaine, 1 million tramadol capsules seized. You'd see also wife bolts door as Ogun pastor allegedly rapes teenage chorister, couple arrested. Kogi drags EFCC to court over controversial 19.3 billion naira fund, demands 35 billion naira. I thought we had through that, but yeah, here we are. All right, well, those are the stories that made the headlines on the Punch this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the stories on the Nation newspaper. The lead story there, Omicron, federal government to ban flights from UK, Canada. The riders, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, UAE on red list. Another rider states diplomats back retaliatory action. And on page 8 of the Nation newspaper, you'd find Buhari, Makinde, Obasanjo Tinubu mourn as Seun dies at 95. And on page 7, you'd see PDP, APC trade words over 2023 polls. Wike sets agenda for Ayu. And on page 5 of the Nation newspaper, Kogi sues EFCC over 9.3 billion naira bailout saga. Bankers invest 40 billion naira in National Theatre. You also see EFCC probes governor for withdrawing 60 billion naira. That's huge. So these are some of the lead stories of the Nation newspaper.
All right, finally on The Guardian. The lead story says over 77 billion naira loans, bad governance kill Agri-Bank. With the rider, Bank MD admits failure of ABP loans as recapitalization fails. You'd also see BP affirms BOA unviable, difficult to recapitalize. Well, the other stories there beside the pictorial shows you the story about FG to place UK, Canada, Saudi Arabia, others on red list today. And then other stories at the top. Nigeria will not break up, says PDP chairman. Ayu, find that on page 4. Kogi drags EFCC to court over alleged hidden 19.3 billion naira, demands 35 billion naira damages. No future in APC, PDP for Southeast, says Okore. And then you would see also NFF terminates Raw's appointment, makes Egovon Eagles interim coach. These are the stories that made the headlines this morning on the papers. Now let's get some perspectives on these stories. Like we told you, we have the Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Daily Trust newspaper, and also the Chairman, Editorial Board, Daily Trust newspaper, also at the same time, giving us perspectives on this. So if you're wondering who is behind the story about the editorial yesterday, he is the chairman of that board. So, well, we'll be talking about other stories that also got our attention this morning. Talking about the travel restrictions. It's all over the newspapers. The Daily Trust leads with the story, passengers stranded over fresh Nigeria UAE row. Quite a lot of back and forth. We are seeing also reactions that are following this, some in favor, some not in favor of this. Are we making the right moves?
Well, but it's interesting that all the newspapers were leading with it, except of course The Guardian.
Right.
So I was more interested in The Guardian story because the others are going the same way. But it's a non-issue actually. Non-issue in the sense that it only demonstrates once again the kind of how we approach other countries, how we understand the world. We have this, when it comes to international affairs, I think that Nigeria has an inward thinking mentality. We always feel that the way we understand issues between us and other countries, that's how people and governments in other parts of the world do. All our newspapers are talking about this. I doubt if there's a single newspaper in the UAE that is talking about this right now. You can see.
Right.
Or if there's a single newspaper in the UK that is talking about this in relation to Nigeria specifically. Or if there's a single newspaper in Canada that is talking about this issue in relation to Nigeria specifically. That is the measure of our importance. We are importance in international affairs. We are not important. We just think that we are. And that thinking is largely internal, not only to us. Just like, I was speaking with the South African ambassador the other day, and he was saying that it's only in Nigeria that we know that Nigeria helps South Africa, during apartheid. South Africans, they are not aware. So it's exactly the same thing, Nigeria has, UAE, the Emirates has 21 flights, between Nigeria and Dubai. Air Peace has 4 only. You understand? Because that's the structural issue at stake, So even that 21 that Emirates has, if you compare it to all the flights that it has in all its fleet as a business, or even as a national carrier of the UAE, it amounts to zero, to nothing. That for that peace has is so important to us. That's why our government is putting it on head on behalf of peace. It just reflects how unserious we are, and we really need to understand how the world works. You understand? You know, if you look at, I have traveled London to Abuja or London to Lagos more than 50 times on different airlines, and I can tell you what happens. 100% of the time. Well, there was a time you had Arik Air and Medview. These ones were pretending to be Nigerian Airlines. They're not Nigerian Airlines. Most of them don't own aircraft of their own. They lease from other countries. So half or more than half of the profits go to these other countries, you know. So what do you need? You need a strong airline or strong airlines. You don't need to have Air Peace, Medview, Dana. You don't need 20, 30 different airlines. You need 2 or 3 that are strong and viable, and which can compete not only for space, not only domestically, but also on international flights. You understand? If you look at the BA has a flight from Abuja to London every day, twice. Abuja to London, London back, you know, and then from Lagos to London, and then Lagos to London, London back to Lagos. Someone once told me that of Lagos is even twice. I'm aware of one. So there's hardly a time that you go on that flight that is not filled up. You understand? You know, the economy, the business class, and even the first class.
So in other words, you are saying that this is the wrong move for Nigeria? Is that what you're saying?
The thing is, it is showing the wrong moves of the past. The cumulative wrong moves of the past, that what we needed to have done is to have had a strong airline that can compete with other airlines, so that even if the UAE cancel Nigeria's flights, that airline will not feel anything. You understand? You know, if the Emirates, the 21 flights, it's Nigerians that are going, it's majority Nigerians that are coming as well. There are not many UAE people coming here or living here.
So Nigeria is more at loss.
Exactly, that's the point, because we have put ourselves at a weakened position in relation to other countries by not doing the things we ought to have done to strengthen ourselves, and largely because of noise making such as the one you're saying.
No, I think I would like to talk, editorially. Other newspapers, the Daily Trust, the Punch, and the Nation are leading with similar stories, but the Guardian decided to lead with a different story. In your opinion, why did they choose, that as a priority?
That's a brilliant question. I don't think they probably knew that other newspapers are going to lead with the Omicron issue, but editors have that feel of news, on a daily basis. They have an idea of what other newsrooms will be thinking. So everyone knows that Omicron and the so-called row between Nigeria and the UAE is no row at all. Row is equal. Both sides think the same. There's no row here because I don't think the UAE cares or is even aware that we think that we are in a row with them. You understand? So that's not a row. So reporting it as if is even not right in the first place. So the people in the Guardian probably weren't thinking. Probably they chanced upon a story, an exclusive about the Bank of Agric, and as you can see, it looks like a story in which they had taken initiative to report themselves. But of course, I'm not here to promote the Guardian.
All right, now let's also just talk more about this travel thing. Do you see this as something that is probably demonstrating the need why we should have, a national carrier in Nigeria?
There are many things here involved. There is culture. You understand? For example, if you fly on British Airways, the flight is 95% filled by Nigerians, or 75-80%. The same on Virgin Atlantic, the same on KLM, the same on Lufthansa, the same on Air France, the same on many of these different carriers. And yet, they will serve you European food. That's a cultural statement there. That why, if the bulk of the passengers are Nigerians, there should be Nigerian menu on the flight. That's the cultural one. There's also the economic one. The fact that we don't have aircraft or carriers that can actually compete. For example, how much people are just fighting over 10,000 naira from Lagos to Kano, from Lagos to Maiduguri, Abuja to Sokoto, Abuja to Lagos, and so on and so forth. How much does that entail? Maybe the cost of a business flight for one person from London to Abuja or Abuja to London will more than cover 20 people from Lagos, or 30 people, or even 50 people from Lagos to Kaduna. So all our aircraft are busy fighting over the domestic crumbs, whereas the entirety of international flights in Nigeria is left for the carriers of other countries. The businesses, the aviation businesses of other countries. And we think that makes sense. And that's what leads to the international dimension, international affairs or international politics dimension of it. You don't participate actively in world affairs unless you are strong at home. In every sector. In this sector, we're not strong. Air Peace probably after a few years, because we've seen that before with Arik Air when it was having international flights, and then after a few years it went down again because they are not strong individually. So instead of even thinking of bringing Air Nigeria back, why not support these ones to merge, like you merge the banks, so that you have 2 or 3 of them, and then they can be having direct flights to Istanbul, direct flight to London, to Frankfurt, you understand, to many different countries, and they are Nigerians, and then jobs will be created, and then the economy grows.
In November, the Minister of Aviation announced that Nigeria Air will be lifting in April of 2022. Do you think this is going to change anything for us?
I think the change is I don't know, and I cannot tell, but the entirety of Air Nigeria looks like a scam to me. And I'm being honest, that's exactly what I feel. Why do I say it looks like a scam? If you look at it, it says that 5% will belong to government, 49% will belong to Nigerian, domestic entrepreneurs, investors like you and me, if you have the money. I don't, and then it's not bad not to have the money, but it's also not bad to have the money. It's fine. And then the last part, I think 45% will belong to international or foreign investors, and we don't know more than that yet, and we're just a few months from April. We need to know who are the 49%, domestic investors, because sometimes they will say domestic investors or whatever, and it's just one person or 2 people fronting, or someone fronting for someone else in government. This is key in Nigeria. So we need more information, more transparency on that issue, and then also who are the foreign investors. But the key question is that if government is going to have only 5% of stakes in Air Nigeria, why are we even bothering about it? Why do we even have to spend government money? Just imagine, government has already spent over 9 billion on consultancy fees alone. You understand? And then only in the end to come and own 5% of stakes in it. Why do we have to bother? You can just as well leave it to these private sector organizations to put up all the money and to put up the Air Nigeria. So it smells to me as a newsman, like a scam, and we really need to find to dig deeper into it.
Right. All right. Let's take on other stories now. We have a reaction from the presidency following the Daily Trust editorial from yesterday, and this one here we're seeing what Buhari is doing to tackle insecurity, apparently as a response to that editorial, talking about how lives have lost their value in Nigeria under the president's watch. Now, what's your, I would say, response to the response?
I don't know if I should respond personally, because it's an editorial board. I'm only the chairman of the editorial, so I only chair the discussions and guide the discussions and do that. But what I want to say is that the board, you know, the process, and I'm sure the people in the presidency know, the process is entirely objective and fair. We make a list of issues that we consider are most important at that time, and then we discuss them very, very robustly. We have members not only from within the newspaper, but throughout the country and beyond. In fact, we have a hybrid system now. Lots of people join us from the US, from the UK, you know, Nigerians in diaspora who can contribute to discussions on any issue on the planet, you know. So our discussions tend to be quite enriched, quite robust. And on this particular editorial, I remember the discussions were quite fierce. You know, people felt very strongly about what has been going on and about the government's response to it, and that came out, and happily it came out well in the editorial. So my response is, well, if the government had done the things that they needed to do in the first place, probably would have had a different editorial. But more importantly, probably the incidents that generated the editorial in the first place would not have happened, you know. So it's not just about what government is doing, but how Nigerians are feeling what government is doing. That is important.
Well, one of the responses, if I may just highlight, is the fact that the presidency is you know, saying that Nigeria's situation or Nigeria's case is not peculiar, it's not unique. Rightfully so, if you look at, you know, other trends in, you know, other African countries, Burkina Faso, you know, Mali, and the rest of them. But then again, others will say, isn't that, you know, more like an SKP kind of, you know?
Well, there's truth in that. There's truth in that. But where that truth relates to is not the specific issue for which the editorial is about. You know, there's truth in the fact that certain events are epochal, meaning that they happen, they spread across a period. Therefore, the place is insignificant. You understand? Terrorism, you know, is one such event. You know, it's something that has been happening in many countries of the world in the last 20 years or so. So that you can say that that's epochal. You know, he can say that it's not specific to Nigeria and so on. There's truth in that. There's also, you know, the one key driver of these issues, you know, climate change. It's affecting the countries that he mentions. You know, the countries in the Lake Chad basin, but also places like Mali, you know, Burkina Faso and all. If you look at, they are similar in vegetation and climate to the areas where these things are happening. So that driver is there to that extent. So there's that's a fair comment. But that by itself does not mean that we should happily accept it or watch that thing should infest. Nobody is complaining, and even the editorial admitted it, that these are complex issues, and their own response even admitted the admittance of the editorial, that these are complex issues. It is the response, the nonchalance attitude of the government. It doesn't bother me as much as you think. Attitude of the government that people are complaining. That's what people are angry about, because that's what is making things worse. This thing started much at a lower scale. Now we've got to a stage where bandits can shoot down airplanes, where they can tax whole communities.
Where they have choppers landing in bushes.
Well, that one is fake news.
I'm really interested, you know, talking about nonchalancy. There's this story that really caught my attention about reaction as Emirate Turban's Buhari's son. Well, some will say there's so much upheaval in the country, and they're talking about
there's nothing wrong with that. Please, the thing is this: we have to be very tolerant as a society. That tolerance is important in solving problems of violence. You understand? You know, if the emir is turbaning the president's son, Yusuf, I don't know if that's the name, you know, if he has more children, I don't know. The man should not in any way have to explain the actions of his father as president. These are two different things. You understand? I know that he's been turbaned because he's Buhari's son. Yes, you understand? You know, but I don't see the connection between that and you know. So I'm happy for the young man for the turban. I don't see that that means that because we are angry with Buhari, and I am angry with the president, that column at the back page is mine. You read it, you show that I am angry with the president. But that doesn't mean that the sun should not be turbaned by anyone who wants to.
Okay,
Right.
well, we'll look more on that, about the insecurity and all of that, and the
Yes.
different dimensions to it. But another one closely related is another one that the Daily Trust economists, are seeking injection of 2.2 trillion naira in the education, health, and health sector. That's as regards the fuel subsidy, conversation. The government, of course, is proposing that 2.4 trillion naira, as something that will cushion the effect of the removal of the subsidy and all of that. And as part of the response with regards to the issue of insecurity, the government have also said that, look, we are also focusing on other areas, non-violent solutions, to this crisis by looking at maybe infrastructure and all of that. So if you place this side by side, are we having a sustainable kind of an approach, to doing that?
I think if we work, I think it's sustainable and it's something that can work. If, and unfortunately in our case in Nigeria, it's a big if we're faithful in implementing these ideas, certainly there is no amount of force that you can use that will solve the problem of Boko Haram or banditry or any of the other forms of violence that we have in this country. It is just unfortunate that the discourse around violence in the country has been pushed and driven by a Pentecostal attitude. What do I mean by a Pentecostal attitude? A Pentecostal attitude that which sees no room, for meeting point, between diverse groups in the country. So the only discourse that is acceptable is force and violence. Kill them, kill them, kill them, kill them. That's not gonna work. We have done it for 10 years. It has not worked. So maybe it's time that we start thinking, and even in the editorial, it was clear that we know force alone cannot solve the complexity, such a complex issue. So if you have infrastructure and injection of education and health, that can help. But please, what is necessary the most because this health, education and all that, they have an impact, but their impact are long-term impacts. What you need is an immediate short gap or short-term measure that will draw millions and thousands of young people away from the streets into productive employment. You get what I'm saying? Where people will have jobs, where people will have incomes, where people will have homes, or at least dreams of homes.
How can the government achieve that? If you look at,
It's
the
very
social investment programs that government has initiated, it's all part of, efforts to, change these narratives and to have more young people engaged, having something to do and all of that. So all this social, so
believe me, is the
in terms
easiest
of
thing. Government can say-
effectiveness and efficiency, is that working?
No, believe me, it's not difficult as it appears. Government can ask people to come and dig holes and pay them for digging holes. And then after they have finished digging holes, pay them again to fill the holes back. Just to get them to do something and earn income for doing something. So don't tell me that it's difficult. It's difficult only to the extent that people's imagination allows them. That's one. Government has the capacity to create employment immediately, but we are shackled by ideas that think that all of these things have to come from somewhere called market. It doesn't. The state can be the lead as well. So that's one. Secondly, you talked about inefficiency and so on. I agree, unfortunately, but part of the reason for that is the discourse around this issue. They say poverty alleviation. If I want to do poverty alleviation for you, in a way I'm saying that you should remain poor, but the effects of the poverty should be slightly alleviated. That's the point. So the thinking from day one is not to remove poverty from individuals or from society as a whole, collectively. The thinking is, okay, let's give them a kekena pep. Let's give them, you get what I'm saying? Let's give them something that will, palliative, something that will alleviate the pain. Temporarily, but which will not, like you said, sustain, will not lead to any, long-term sustenance. So if you change that thinking, then maybe you now have room in your head to start thinking that, wow, I can, if I say, just for mention that, if we say that, let us have, for example, 50,000 housing units in each state of the Federation. The population to erect this one is there. You can say that those ones should even be built by mud, which you have more than enough in every part of the country. You understand? Even if the houses break down and all that, it doesn't matter. What matters is that people are working. You understand? And they're earning income from the work that they do.
All right.
Looks like we have to end discussion here.
I'd like to say really, but we have to end it at this point.
Yeah, me too. That's all right. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you again on the program.
As usual.
Yes, we've been speaking with Suleiman, Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Daily Trust newspaper, and also the Chairman, Editor of Board, Daily Trust.
But in a situation where you find that look at the
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that